breaking down every game, every day in Major League Baseball. This is the Baseball Betting Show. Here is your host, Greg Peterson.
And warmer from Evo, welcome to lovely Las Vegas for the Baseball Betting Show with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. And boy, oh boy, it is so good to be back here, as this is a podcast that is going to be uploaded every single day at midnight Pacific, 3 o'clock a.m. Eastern, in which we've got baseball games. So for those of you guys that have listened to the podcast in the past, it is the same format, picks and analysis on every single game, every single day. And in the final segment, well, we've got a nice warm-up one game between the Giants and the New York Yankees. I'll give you guys picks and analysis on that as we touch them all. We'll have much more games tomorrow and moving forward, but a little bit of a warm-up on the podcast today. Here in segment number 1, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how I break down baseball, how it might vary from a few other sports I handicap. Big reason why I really don't dive into futures as well, though. These next few days, I will talk to a few guys that do have some baseball futures. Our good friend William Bohr over at Action Network is going to be joining me tomorrow, so if you're looking to get on some of those last-second win totals, things like that, you're going to be able to do so. I personally am a little bit more of a game-to-game better, so I'll talk about that here in the first segment. As in segment number 2, our good friend Curtis Rogers. He does pre- and post-game hosting over at 710 Seattle Sports. He is the pre- and post-game host for the Seattle Mariners, is going to be joining me, and I have to talk with him, obviously, a little bit about what we can expect from the Mariners this year, the American League West in general, teams that he's feeling bullish/bearish on as well. And then in the final segment, we break down that first game as we touch them all. If you do have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of two ways we'll fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, letter CM, they mean does not matter, so per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it's very much appreciated. Then from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. And really didn't receive a ton because, well, I know that a lot of you guys are in college basketball mode right now, but that said, I do want to just parse through a little bit about my handicapping style with regards to baseball. First things first, big reason why I'm just not really too much of a futures guy is because you don't know what to expect with regards to injuries, and sometimes you just have a player that just has a completely awful year. Like, we see that time and time again when it comes to baseball. Like, I remember a few years ago, Marcell Ozuna was terrible, and then, like, he became the most important player for the Atlanta Braves. And speaking of the Atlanta Braves, they had so many injuries last year. It felt like it was a stone cold lead pipe block of the century of the week that they were going to be able to make the playoffs in 2025. That did not wind up happening. So I do think that it is very important, at least for my perspective, to just be keeping it a little bit more game to game, because I don't want to have my money tied up in something for 6+ months for one. I know that there's some people I can relate. There are other people that they bet exclusively futures. And if that is you, just do what works for you. Because for me, futures is not necessarily my forte. I've learned this over the years. If you're someone that you find a lot of success with futures, by all means do so. And that's the biggest thing of everything as well, because there are some people out there that they're very successful game to game. They don't have a lot of success with futures, vice versa. And then there are some that are in between A and B. You do a relatively okay job with futures. Maybe you're not killing it, but you're doing an okay job. Maybe you're not killing it in terms of game to game, but again, doing okay. You just pick your spots. That's all good too. So I always encourage you to just do what works for you. Never be what I like to call blind tailor. Just because someone throws out there a pick, whether that be this fine podcast, whether that be out there on social media, whether that be someone selling picks, always bet what you like and what you truly believe in. That, I think, is always bigger than anything else. But that said, for me, I just really capitalize on the fact that I do consider myself a grinder. Like, this podcast has been uploaded every single day in which we've had Major League Baseball games since 2019. That's what I really specialize in, the game-to-game sort of grind, taking a look at things one day at a time. So it's a big reason why I stay away from futures, and I try to maximize my efforts and my just overall attention span in terms of the game-to-game action. And for me, when it comes to baseball, I do like to handicap a few days in advance, but that comes with a caveat. Like, if you take a look on VSiN.com, if you take a look on my Twitter/X feed at gunit_81, you'll find the link with my spreadsheet with daily handicap baseball lines. It's always good to be up there, and it'll be a few days in advance. I do post up my initial numbers, but as you know, with baseball, there's bullpen usage. Sometimes if you have like a 3-game road trip out there in Milwaukee, and then you have to travel to Cincinnati. Sometimes you have a rain delay in one of these places. I would sure hope not in Milwaukee, because, man, if you have a rain delay in Milwaukee, considering they have a roof, then something has went horribly wrong there. But that said, you have an extra inning game in the case of a game in Milwaukee. If you're playing in Cincinnati, maybe you get a rain delay there. That late travel can sometimes cause for a little bit of strife. That does cause a little bit of just wear and tear on a team in general. And then you obviously have the pitching switches as well, which you're going to find quite a few of those towards the beginning part of the season as well. So I always think that you need to be malleable with that regard. But for me personally, I do find a lot of success with having numbers in mind, because I do think that for me personally, and this goes with all sports, I want to have a number in mind before I truly go to bet it, because I don't want the influence of the books and the odds makers to be having influence on my personal handicap. And again, I will be making adjustments if I see like a heavy bullpen usage day, or it's vice versa. Guy throws a complete game, bullpen's completely fresh. That helps out the team. So I always think that that's very important to be doing as well. Always want to be taking a look to see if there's like some last second weather snafu, especially when it comes to a place like Wrigley Field. That's why you're typically not going to find totals posted at Wrigley Field until the day of the game. For opening day on Thursday, it's going to be a little bit of a different situation, but for the most part, a lot of books are going to be waiting until the AM to be able to post up those numbers. But I do think that with baseball as well, when it comes to the early part of the season, I typically will shade down my totals a little bit, because weather is a big part of it. As a lot of people know out there in the Midwest, it has been very, very cold. I am someone that was born in the great state of Wisconsin. I know that you Wisconsinites got a lot of snow here over the last week or so, and it's been less than great to say the least. That means that the balls that would be flying out in June and July probably not going to be flying out this time of year. I will also ask Curtis about this as well. We now have the actual replay with regards to the umpires. Now, with the replay system, you're not going to be getting every single ball and strike reviewed. You have to prompt the replays. We're going to be diving in on those aspects a little bit with Curtis as well. Who does that help? Who does that hurt? I personally think that might help out the batters a little bit more than the pitchers, but I see a lot of the games for Thursday with higher totals than what you're typically going to find on opening day, and I think that perhaps they've went a little bit too far there. So that's something that I always like to be taking a look at as well. Maybe I'll need to make a little bit of an adjustment there. That's something that is very much worth keeping in mind. And when it comes to coming into the upcoming baseball season, I am not going to utilize too much of these spring training stats. Now, I feel like exclusive to this year, and this is something else I'm going to talk about with our good friend Curtis Rogers, being able to gauge how these guys did in the World Baseball Classic. I think it's going to be a good little indicator of what we can expect out of some of these guys early on during the season. And there are some guys that maybe got buried on the bench that are very good players. I know that one that Curtis brought up, since I already did the interview, is Gunnar Henderson, and that could actually hurt them a little bit, but seeing them in a very good live game situation, a little bit different than if a guy maybe got shelled in spring training, but he was trying out a whole bunch of new pitches, everything like that. The biggest thing that I take a look at with regards to spring training is, are you actually out there on the field and were you competing? Like a good example of this is Zach Wheeler of the Philadelphia Phillies, which obviously he had a very unfortunate end to his season last year. You feel bad for the guy. And Zach Wheeler, we should be seeing him at some point here in the season this year. Probably going to be starting out the first few weeks down, but that said, he'll probably be back up relatively soon. But I recall fading him for like the first 2-3 games of the season last few seasons, because he oftentimes did have either a stop and start in terms of spring training, or he didn't get in his full allotment of work during spring training. And that turned out to be successful. After he got 2 or 3 starts under his belt, he wound up being the Zach Wheeler that we all know and love, a guy that you're able to bank on and made you a whole bunch of money. I think that those are big things to be taking a look at. And there are some standout performers at the plate that, hey, maybe you should be taking note of, like some of these guys that come over from Japan as well. Like, how is the Japanese numbers going to be translating to America? Cody Ponce, the Ponsation, who was over in the KBO last season. He was terrible with the Pirates a few seasons ago. Goes over to the KBO, completely dominates. How is he going to be looking now? Is he the same guy that we saw over with the Pirates? Is he going to be as dominant as he was with the KBO? Probably going to be somewhere between A and B. And taking a look at track records of success / track records of failure, I think is going to be something that is very interesting as well, because we're going to be talking about this player with our good friend in Curtis Rogers as well, a guy like an Adley Rutschman. Adley Rutschman was bad last year. I think that Adley Rutschman will admit that Adley Rutschman was bad last season, and he was banged up. 2 years ago, he was an all-star, looking like one of the rising stars in all of baseball, had a big impact on his team being able to win games. How to be able to gauge a guy like that as well. And I do think that when it comes to the upcoming baseball season, you have to rely a lot on the 2025 numbers to start with. Once you get, I would say, about a month worth of data, that's typically where I land. 4 weeks, sometimes a little bit more, sometimes a little bit less. With pitchers, I think that perhaps you want a little bit more than a month, because especially the first start or two, you're going to be seeing starters go lesser into games. Like typically a lot of these guys are going to be limited to more like 70 to 80 pitches, whereas typically in a start you're going to be going closer to 100 pitches. Now, that'll vary from pitcher to pitcher, especially with the young guys, but I think that that's important to be doing as well. So those are all big giant elements in terms of taking a look at things. Obviously, ballpark dimensions is very big, and that's something that I always try to account for. Like, you're not going to be setting the same total in Coors Field as you're going to be at, say, Miami, for example. I think that that's always very important to be doing as well. And then obviously you have the weather implications, things of that nature. So home field, home court advantage in any sport is very important. But I do think that's very big for baseball totals in general as well, because these ballpark dimensions, some of these ballparks, they are very, very helpful to righties. Sometimes they're very, very harmful to righties as well. Like the Crawford boxes out there in Houston, very good example of this as well. So I think that there's a lot that is to be taken a look at, and the breakdowns I give you every single day on this podcast, that's exactly what I'm taking a look at. That's exactly what I'm factoring in, and it's just like with those of you guys that listen to my college basketball podcast, every single game is its own living, breathing entity based on how available / unavailable the bullpen is, the righty-lefty splits, the location of the game. Is it a hot weather game? Is it a cold weather game? Is a player streaky or not? Like, when it comes to college basketball, I very, very rarely use trends. I very, very rarely use streaks. Yeah, there are some teams that they get hot and cold towards the back half of seasons, but I do think that baseball is a little bit more of a streaky sport. It's a sport where you can see a team lose 100 games, but there's going to be like some 2-week span where the Colorado Rockies are probably going to be terrible again this year, but there will be like some 2 or 3 week span where the Colorado Rockies look like the LA Dodgers, and it's going to be absolutely hilarious when they make you a whole bunch of money for those 2 or 3 weeks, and then they go back to being sad and pathetic. And I don't think that they're going to be quite as sad and pathetic as they were last season. I sure hope not, because that was really, really bad, but I do think that when it comes to baseball, sometimes you just need to do a vibe check. You need to take a look at, all right, last 10 games, these guys have been really, really good, so there's a lot to factor in. The full season sort of data points and the last 10, last 15 games of data as well. So there's a lot of parsing through. There's a lot of just situational handicaps in baseball, and it's a money line sport. Like, when it comes to reading the spreadsheet that I've got, we're going to just utilize this for the Yankees versus Giants. I made the Yankees a minus 133 favorite. And what that means is that if the money line were to be minus 132 or less, I'd be willing to lay it with the New York Yankees. At a plus 134 or higher, I'd be willing to take a shot on the Giants. Like right now, as I'm recording this, I'm seeing between about like minus 114, minus 122 with the Yankees. That's a buy point on the Yankees. And sometimes with this, there's just no buy point. Like, I set this line at minus 133. Let's say that the Yankees are minus 135 and the Giants are plus 125. In that case, I would be taking a look at the run line price, which I do the exact same thing with the run line. If there's nothing there, you shop the line, you wait around, because sometimes when it comes to the day of the game, first pitch, you find a little bit more of a differential. You'll see a lot of steam come in. I have found at like 4 or 5 a.m. Pacific, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock a.m. Eastern, that's when a lot of folks get on the apps. They get on there and they start to fire in. So I do think that that's always something to be doing. And then with regards to totals, like I set a run total of a 7.2. What I do for the run totals is I pretty much simulate, all right, how many runs do I think would happen if they play this game twice? Like, if they played this game twice, I think that the Yankees would score 38 total runs and the Giants would score 34 total runs for a total of 72. So that's why I put a total of a 7.2 in there. So I want to be trying to keep things right around about minus 110, minus 115 with regards to totals. I actually think that you can find great value in terms of going up or down a half a run if you're getting like plus money. Like, I set this total as 7.2. If I were to take a look at an under of 7, but I was getting like plus 110 or something like that, I actually would take the plus 110 at a 7 to go under because I'm getting that plus money. In this case, right now we're looking at the board of Yankees versus Giants. You're getting pretty much even money, minus 105 to take the over, which I do find my advantage with because 7.2 is higher than 7. That is going to be a buy point for me on the over. Like if this were a total of, for example, 7.5 at my 7.2, I'd be in on the under as long as we have a respectable juice. Again, I think that point of no return for me is minus 120. For others, it might be minus 115. For others, it might be minus 125. For me, it's really minus 120. Once you get past that, I think that you've gone too far, and I am going to be a little bit of an advocate for like plus money. Now, I don't want to be going too extreme. Like if you're trying to go under 6 and you're at plus 110 and I make my total 7.2, that full run of differential, that's just not enough for me to be enticed by the plus 110. You'd have to be giving me something huge, like maybe plus 175. Yeah, plus 175. We're starting to find a little bit of an edge there, but not currently at like a plus 110 or something like that. So I do think that those are all big things to be taking a look at because with baseball, it's a money line sport. Sure, you do have the run line, and there's going to be times when like the Colorado Rockies are playing and they're going to be getting plus 2.5, plus 3.5. And with the Dodgers, you might be needing to lay minus 2.5, minus 3.5. I do very, 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 very few alternate lines. I try to keep it to the minus 1.5 because I do think the win by more than 2 runs in baseball can be very difficult, even for a lot of these top teams. But I do think that with regards to baseball, it is all about just being able to win over time as well. Because a lot of people are always, in terms of sports betting in general, being like, oh, what's your win-loss record and everything like that. In baseball, you could legitimately be 10-10 and be up a whole bunch of money. Like if the San Francisco Giants, you bet them 10 times and they go 5-5 at plus money, you're up money. If the New York Yankees in this series go 5-5 and you're laying minus 120 every single time, you're down money. Like that's a big thing with baseball. Always be keeping in mind the units rather than the wins and losses. Now, it's obviously a little bit correlated unless if you're taking massive Chocopalooza, because if you're laying minus $2, even if you're hitting at like 60%, you're still going to be absolutely miserable. But that said, always be taking a look at that because you're not getting as much minus 110, minus 115, aside from really the totals in Major League Baseball. You're going to be laying some juice from time to time, and I'm willing to lay juice. Like, I'm never a person that thinks that there's needs to be a threshold for how much juice you can lay, because one of the best bets of my life was when Floyd Mayweather was taking on Conor McGregor in a boxing match, my first out here in lovely Las Vegas. I was able to get minus $4 on Floyd Mayweather, and I put pretty much my entire bank account on it because I was sitting there thinking, well, he should win this fight 99 out of 100 times. If you think a guy is going to win 99% of the time, minus $4 is actually really, really, really good value. Now, I'm not one of those guys because we see some of those out there with regards to like the NCAA tournament laying 9,000 on the 1 seeds. Yeah, that's going a little bit too far. In baseball, you're typically not going to find minus 9,000. So that's a good thing, but that said, I don't think that there's a specific threshold. Now, I personally am not going to be giving out a bunch of Choco minus $2 favorites or anything like that. I typically find a lot more value when a team is like minus $2, but they're at home, laying like a minus 105, even money sort of run line. That's the way that I go personally. But again, there will be some times where I will take that chalky money line over the run line as well. Again, situational handicapping. So hopefully that clears up a little bit of what I do with regards to my baseball handicapping. Again, any questions, fire those in at gunit_81. And how about if we chat it up with our good friend Curtis Rogers? He does such great work over at 710 Seattle Sports as a pre- and post-game host of the Seattle Mariners. And he joins me on the flip side right here on the Baseball Betting Show with myself, Greg Peterson, now a part of the VSiN Family Podcast.
Breaking down every game, every day in Major League Baseball. This is the Baseball Betting Show. Here is your host, Greg Peterson.
And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for the Baseball Betting Show with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. If you've listened to this fine podcast over the years, you'll recall this man, Curtis Rogers, says, I believe he was my first guest on this podcast last year as well, and it's because he does such an incredible job looking at this great sport of baseball. He's over there at 710 Seattle Sports as the pre- and post-game host for the Seattle Mariners. He does a great job covering all things out there in the Pacific Northwest, whether that be the Seattle Seahawks. I know that he has joined me a lot on the Coast to Coast Hoops College Basketball Podcast as well, looking at that great sport and so much more. You're able to follow him on the old Twitter /X along with Instagram at a kid from Kent altogether. And Curtis, Welcome back, my friend. It's been a long time, and it's great to have you on. Thank you.
It has been. We're knocking off the rust of the off season, but it's a joyous occasion. Opening day is just a couple days away. I'm super excited for this season, and it just feels like coming off of how special the World Baseball Classic was. There's just so much momentum heading into this season, so much excitement. I can't wait to dive into it with you, Greg, and I can't wait for opening day to get here. It's almost here.
Yep, it certainly is. And how much do you think that you were able to gauge some of these players that were playing in the World Baseball Classic rather than just spring training? Because I think one of the biggest tricks for myself just handicapping this is trying to determine what's for real, what's for not when it comes to spring training, because you have some guys that are just trying stuff out. There are some guys that are trying to make the team. And with the World Baseball Classic, that's a very, very, shall we say, competitive environment where I feel like you get a better gauge of these guys.
The guys who did participate in the World Baseball Classic, I think they have a bit of an edge because you've got much more of an in-season environment when you play in such a tournament like that, where you don't really have to worry about hitting the ground running. Like, you have already played in big moments to start your season. And also, I think it's a benefit for the guys who are left in camp, the guys who didn't play in the WBC, because they just got more reps. They got more time to play. They got, a starter's workload. So I think it's a benefit for nearly everybody. Now, the guys who I do kind of worry about, though, are maybe the guys who would normally start in their lineup that, just because of how deep the World Baseball Classic lineups were, maybe didn't get their usual allotment of starts. I think about a guy like Gunnar Henderson, who is obviously a star-level player in Major League Baseball, was nearly a 10-win player a couple of years ago for Baltimore, but him and Alex Bregman were kind of in a timeshare a little bit. Guys like Cal Raleigh and Will Smith, they were going back and forth between who was starting, who was going to be the backup catcher. So there is maybe a little bit of concern with those guys. Did they get their full allotment of spring training at bats? Did they get their full work in? I did have a conversation with, some people in the Mariners front office prior to the WBC and just asked them, hey, is there concern about sending so many guys? I believe the Mariners had 17, which was the most or tied for the most in baseball. And they were like, no, not too much. We just told the guys that, if you want to go play in the WBC, you have our blessing. You just got to make sure you get your offseason work in time and make sure that, everything is taken care of before you go, because we just don't have an eye on you when you kind of depart for whatever your country is. So it's mainly beneficial for everybody, but there is still a little bit of concern about the guys who maybe didn't get to play as much during the tournament.
Yeah, but I think that that's very well said by you, and I think that there are some positives and some negatives to it as well. As Curtis Rogers, who does such great work over at 710 Seattle Sports, is joining me right here on the Baseball Betting Show. And you mentioned there were a few Seattle Mariners that partook in the World Baseball Classic. I think Cal Raleigh and Randy Arozarena were the most famous of the two, with their little bit of a brouhaha. So that was good, clean family fun right there. But that said, how do you take a look at this Mariners team going into the season? Because for the Mariners, for the most part, they're always fighting for that playoff spot. It's dependent upon the year whether or not they've been able to get the job done. And now I feel like with the Astros fall off in the AL West, it's now becoming incumbent upon the Seattle Mariners to have expectations of not just making the playoffs, but perhaps winning the division itself.
Yeah, I think that is where the expectations start this year, is a repeat of a division championship. And I think beyond that, I think even the guys in the clubhouse will tell you that they want to get to a World Series in the absolute worst way, with how close that they got last year. 8 outs away from a World Series. It has just been eating away at them all off season long. We've heard from guys like Cal Raleigh and Julio and Brian Wu, and just, how close they got last year. I think it was Brian Wu that said something to the effect of, like, this is no longer a cute story anymore. Like, we're not these plucky Mariners anymore. Like, we're a team that we want to be considered among the game's very best. We talked to a few big national names like Buster Olney and Tim Kirkjian, and they have very high expectations for the Mariners as well. I think if they fall short of an ALCS this year, I think that would be considered a disappointment amongst a lot of people. Look, I think they have a very real shot at winning an American League pennant this year, which is weird. It's been a long time since the Mariners have entered a season with expectations this high. It's been, I would say, maybe 25-ish years since they entered a season with expectations this high. I mean, heck, even when they won 116 games back in '01, they were kind of expected to take a step back because that offseason they had lost Alex Rodriguez and the Texas Rangers. So even in the 2001 offseason, they weren't expected to do as well as they did that year. So I think these might be the biggest expectations they've ever had as a ball club. So I'm super excited to see how they come out playing. Can they live up to those expectations? Can they stay healthy? I know they've had a couple of bumps and bruises in camp. It looks like J.P. Crawford's expected to start the year on the IL. It looks like Bryce Miller too will probably start the year on the IL dealing with an oblique injury. So those are two big contributors. But other than that, you got a clean bill of health. You got a couple of prospects that are kind of knocking at the door as well. So there's going to be opportunities. And I just think this year is shaping up to be one of the most important ones in Mariners history.
Oh, it certainly is, especially with the big bad wolf and the Houston Astros seemingly taking a little bit of a setback. And what are your expectations for them this year? Because everyone is used to seeing them in the playoffs. Everyone is used to them being able to win the AL West. So the fact that they didn't last year was a culture shock to many people. But I think that's going to be very fascinating to see what they're going to be able to do this upcoming season, because they don't quite have that core that they used to have when they were going to the ALCS time and time again.
Yeah, and it does kind of feel like they have sought out veterans to kind of make up for the deficits in their farm system as of late. You look at their roster, very veteran heavy. Guys like Isaac Paredes, guys like Jose Altuve, Carlos Correa, Christian Walker as well, who was a disappointment last year for them. You've got a lot of guys who can probably play DH for you, and I haven't even mentioned Yordan Alvarez, who's the youngest of that group, but also coming off a year where he had plenty of injuries that held him back. So I look at this Astros team, Greg, and to me, do I think they can get to the playoffs? I think they can, but that's if everything goes right for them. I think this might be another step back for them this year. I don't think they are going to be right there with the Mariners atop the American League West. But look, if everything goes right for the Astros, I'm not counting them out. They've got a good back end of their bullpen still with Josh Hader. But, you don't have Framber Valdez eating up innings in that rotation anymore. Now, Hunter Brown, his emergence has been really special for them. He has become one of the best pitchers in the American League. Imai is going to be an interesting name to watch in that rotation as well, coming over from Japan. So I think Houston, if everything goes right, can get into the wild card in the American League. But I just don't see a World Series contender, something that we have kind of come to expect from them over the last decade. I think this year might be another year where they kind of reassess things and may hopefully build that farm system back up. It's going to be probably a couple of years before we see Houston maybe back to the contender level that we've come to know them as over this era of Major League Baseball.
Yep, I'm right there with you. I do think that for the Astros, it's going to be a little bit rough for them. And I do think that AL West in general is going to be interesting, because with the Astros, obviously, it feels like they've taken a step back. With the Angels, they made a few okay offseason moves. If they are starting Alek Manoah, holy crud, just bet against the Angels every single time they throw him. Like, I don't make a lot out of spring training, but my gosh, that was really, really bad. But that said, who might be the biggest competitor to the Mariners? Because the more I look at this division, obviously the Rangers are there, but the more I'm really liking this Athletics team.
I am right there with you, Greg. I am glad you brought up the A's, because that offense in that ballpark, that is going to be an absolute launching pad. It's going to be Coors Field-esque this season. They have got dudes in that lineup for sure. Nick Kurtz, you've got Jacob Wilson, you've got Tyler Soderstrom, Lawrence Butler. I mean, Shea Langoliers had a really good season. He's an underrated catcher. Yeah, exactly. He's a really underrated catcher in Major League Baseball. Made a lot of adjustments to his swing. Not as many strikeouts last year, and really became a force offensively. That offense is really, really good. Now, conversely, the pitching, really, really bad last year because of the ballpark they were playing in. Can they get more out of their pitching rotation? That is going to be the biggest key for this A's team, because they're going to put up runs, and they're going to put up runs on everybody. You just got to make sure that if they're scoring runs on you, you score runs on them, because they're going to be really competitive if they can keep teams off the scoreboard just even so slightly, even just a little bit more than the year prior. I didn't even mention Brent Rooker, who was in the home run derby last year. They're DH. They're very talented DH. So they are. That A's lineup, Greg, It is really, really good. And the fact that most of those players are really young as well, just a credit to their ability to develop those bats. But if they can get just even a smidge of pitching, that's an A's team that I don't think anybody wants to face, and especially an A's team that no one wants to face maybe a couple of years from now either, when these guys are really coming into their own.
Yep, I'm right there with you. I think that team is going to be a lot of fun, and that's certainly a team that feels like we're both high on to be able to take a stride forward this year. And are there a few other teams that you take a look at in Major League Baseball that you feel like people might be sleeping on, and they might be teams that maybe they're not going to challenge the Dodgers for the World Series, because anyone that challenges the Dodgers for the World Series, that'd be a Herculean feat, but they might be able to win more games than the public is expecting?
I'm expecting a bounce back from the Orioles this season. I thought last year, obviously a very disappointing season for them, but the addition of Pete Alonso, that is huge for them. And the young guys on that team taking a step forward. Now, I think the big key for Baltimore is Adley Rutschman cooked. Like, is he not going to be a good player anymore? Like, it's very odd to see a player go from as talented as he was to what he has been over the last couple of years. Now, Rutschman had a pretty good spring, had an 850 OPS during the spring, so that's encouraging for them. They do have Basallo behind the dish, who is a very talented guy as well. You've got Gunnar Henderson still there. Can guys like Colton Cowser, can Heston Kjerstad, can they take a step forward? Kobe Mayo, these are guys that they really need. Jackson Holiday. I mean, this was the most touted farm system in a long time that the Orioles had, and obviously now they need some of those names to kind of step forward and really do some special things. But the emergence last year of Trevor Rogers, I think, was big for them. I think the Orioles right now, Greg, are a team that I'm not going to overlook, but I think they really need some of these young guys to kind of take a step forward here in 2026 to know what they really have in them.
I agree with you, Curtis. I do think that for the Orioles, it's going to be really interesting because they signed Pete Alonso in the offseason as well. So that's a guy that I think is going to be really interesting. And obviously, when it comes to the National League side of things, I pointed at it a second ago. The LA Dodgers, if you don't have them atop the National League right now, I don't know what to tell you. You're just in denial. You can love the Dodgers, you can hate the Dodgers, you can feel indifferent of the Dodgers, but it is quite literally the best team money can buy right now. But if there is a team or two that could be able to provide a little bit of a charge into the Dodgers, that could be able to push them a little bit, who might that team be? Because you remember as well as I do, the Dodgers didn't even have home field advantage against the Milwaukee Brewers in the playoffs last year. They were very banged up, they got healthy, and then they make that World Series run. But is there a team or two out there in the National League that you're feeling bullish on?
In the National League, you always got to be mindful of the Phillies and their rotation, especially, they got Christopher Sanchez locked up to an extension. I think they're always going to have a lot of talent, and the Mets will continue to spend. Now, it is the Mets. It's always a gamble just banking on them to have any kind of consistency. But, I mean, you look at their talent on that roster, Greg. You bring in Bo Bichette. I think Marcus Semien is an interesting name to watch with them. I think he could have a bounce back year, kind of getting away from that Texas team where it kind of felt like maybe some tension between him and Corey Seager. Semien, maybe expected a bounce back from him. That would be a big, big thing for them. And I also like the signing of Jorge Polanco. Polanco had a lot of big hits for the Mariners last year. He had 20-plus home runs. They're going to make him kind of their first base, maybe utility guy in that infield. So I think the Mets are an interesting team to watch in the National League. And it kind of feels like in the Central right now, I would say the Brewers, even though not a whole lot of additions made by them, I still think they are the most talented team in that National League Central. The Cubs are a team that made some improvements as well, especially bringing over Alex Bregman. Now, they did lose Kyle Tucker to the Dodgers. That's no fun, but there's still some talent in that National League Central as well. Heck, even the Pirates, I mean, they look pretty improved this offseason, so who knows what they're capable of. And they've got Connor Griffin kind of waiting in the wings. He'll start the season in AAA, but I would expect him up pretty soon. But if they're going to get challenged, if the Dodgers are going to get challenged by a team in the National League, I think it's going to come right now maybe from a team in the National League East, especially. And who knows, maybe the Braves bounce back as well. There's still a ton of talent on that roster. They're not that far removed from being one of the very best teams in baseball, one of the very best organizations in baseball. So I think there's going to be some pretty decent competition for the Dodgers in the National League this year. Do they run away with it? I don't know. I think they're definitely capable of getting, high 90s, low 100s in terms of wins, but I don't think it's going to be a walk in the park necessarily every single night for the Dodgers.
Yep, I'm right there with you. That's where I'm sort of at with the LA Dodgers as well. And I do think that's going to be interesting to see what we get out of them moving forward. And I do have to ask you about this as well. As we know, there's been so much griping about the umpires. There's been so much made out of that. Finally, we are going to be getting an automated strike zone. Who do you think that helps / hurts? And is this going to be an advantage / disadvantage to either the hitters or the player, or the hitters or the pitchers?
That's an interesting question. I think ultimately it will probably be for the hitters. I think this is a move geared towards generating a little bit more offense, because if there's a questionable called strike and it's on the corner and it's a ball, then that goes to the benefit of the batter. Now, obviously, the pitchers can also initiate a replay if they so choose. The catchers can initiate a replay if they so choose. But judging based off of some of the comments that I've heard from catchers and from pitchers this offseason, it sounds to me like these guys just don't want to do it because they kind of have respect for their fellow umpires. And I've heard, was it Chris Sale of the Braves? I think he came out and said he was never, ever going to use ABS. And it's like, okay, that's fine for you. But if I'm a batter going up against him, if there's anything that I can use to potentially help myself out against him, I'm going to do it. Now, you do run the risk of using one of your challenges early in the game. And do you want to use your challenge in a scoreless game in the second inning, no runners on base? That seems a little, not too advantageous. You'd want to save it for, seventh, eighth, ninth inning, runners on the corners, 2 outs in a big moment. That seems to be the more advantageous spot for that. So there is a bit of a chess match for ABS right now. But ultimately, I think it will benefit the batters more rather than the pitchers and the catchers. I'm really looking forward to it. And I'm looking forward to seeing it just kind of on a day-to-day basis. It has felt a little weird in spring training, but you know what? We thought the pitch clock was weird, and that has become something we don't even really notice as much anymore, especially with game times being a much more palatable 2.5 hours, 2 hours and 45 minutes rather than 3.5 hours. So is this so much different than the baseball that we grew up with? Yes, but again, if it's going to help us get better results, then I think ultimately that's not something we can really complain about. It may be a little clunky to start, but I think over time it's going to become something that we just kind of don't really notice as much anymore.
We have called for it for a very, very, very long time, especially if you're one of those people like myself. You've got to bet on a team with the bases loaded, 2 outs, and the ball is 5 inches off the plate, called strike 3, and you're like, you got to be kidding me. And every single team has felt the brunt of that, to say the least. So I think that it's going to be a very good thing. How it's going to be utilized, I think that that's anyone's guess, but you mentioned it. A lot of people thought that the pitch clock was something that was going to destroy baseball. This is a traditional sport. How are we bringing in a clock? And it's worked out very, very well. So I'm right there with you, Curtis. And Curtis, it is going to be an amazing season. You're going to be dialed in on it all because you do pre and post game hosting for the Mariners, and you do so much more with this great sport, although just in general out there in the Pacific Northwest. So let the good people at home know it's all on tap for you and how people are able to follow along on social media and other platforms.
Yeah, we have got a ton of Mariners content coming out, especially with the start of the season being here. We're broadcasting from the ballpark on opening day. And then every Mariners off day, I come out with my podcast called Extra Innings. You can download it at seattlesports.com or on the Seattle Sports app, wherever it is you get your podcast to. A lot of great content coming out. The YouTube page, Seattle Sports, is what you want to search to find all of our Mariners content out here in the great Northwest. And Greg, always appreciate you having me on. Can't wait to talk some baseball with you over the course of this 162 and even into October. Baseball's back. I'm so excited. I know you are as well. What a time of year this is for us. I cannot wait for this season to start. So thanks again for having me.
It is going to be an amazing season, and Curtis, he does an amazing job looking at this great game that we all know and love of baseball. Cannot wait to get him on throughout the season, and every single time he joins me, he lends such great insights. Big thanks to Curtis for joining me on the Baseball Betting Show, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Coming up next, we start off this baseball season with one game. It's Giants versus the New York Yankees on Netflix, which didn't think that we would have a Netflix game to start the season, but here we are, and I'll give you guys picks and analysis for next as we come on.
Breaking breaking down every game, every day in Major League Baseball. This is the Baseball Betting Show. Here is your host, Greg Peterson.
And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for the Baseball Betting Show with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. Always great to be joined by our good friend Curtis Rogers, who does amazing work over at 710 Seattle Sports. Every single time he joins me, he lends such great insights. He did so once again, so a big thanks to Curtis for joining me in the last segment. Now it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on, well, our lone game on the betting board for this baseball Wednesday, this opening day Wednesday, as we touch them all.
If a game is listed on the betting board, Greg has a side and a total on it, so it is time to touch them all.
Do note that as per usual, any changes that are made to these plays will be listed up on my Twitter/X feed at gunit_D1. I always go in Las Vegas rotation order when there's one game. That's very, very easy to do. So let's have some fun and let's get the baseball season started. 987, 988. It's the Yankees on the road against the Giants. Logan Webb goes for the Giants. Mad Max Fried is on the bump for the Yankees. Yankees are between minus 114 to minus 123 favorites. And between a plus 104 to plus 110 is that number here on the Giants with a total of 7. The under is anywhere between minus 110 to a minus 120. Over is between even a minus 110. And I am in on the over. I did set my total as 7.2. Recognize that Logan Webb throughout his career has been really, really good. He's got some of the more demonstrative home and road splits that you're ever going to find, as at home for his career, hovering right around about a 2.83 ERA with 0.5 home runs allowed per 9 innings. That did go up to 3.10 last season. That's his highest ERA since the COVID 2020 year, so had a little bit of difficulty there. And for Logan Webb on the road career, 3.95 ERA with 0.8 home runs allowed per 9 innings. Max Fried has always been pretty rock solid in the first half of seasons, so in the months of March and April, a career 3.01 ERA. Not a guy that's going to light it up in terms of strikeouts, but he's functional in terms of giving you strikeouts. Last season, his Ks per 9 rate, that was hovering in the neighborhood about 8.7, so I liked what I saw there. And for this New York Yankees team, no longer having Devin Williams in the bullpen, I think is addition by subtraction. I still think that the New York Mets just completely buried that guy when he was playing for the Milwaukee Brewers, as I am a Milwaukee Brewers fan, but you have to expect that there's going to be quite a bit of bullpen action here in this standalone game, especially with the fact that they're, I believe, not going to have to play on Thursday either. They pick up Camilo Duvall, who I've always liked. Camilo Duvall is relatively solid in the bullpen. He had a sub-375 ERA last season. Fernando Cruz was very, shall we say, formidable for this team along Tim Hill. They're going to be looking to David Bednar to not poop the Bednar, but when you take a look at what he was able to do with the Pirates a few seasons ago, that's pretty rock solid. And for the Yankees, they averaged 5.2 runs per game last season. That was tops in all of baseball. You've got a lot of masters that are a little bit of an all-or-nothing team, but being able to have a guy like a Chaz Chisholm who does a solid job in terms of reaching base. Only hit a 242 last season, but he'll draw some walks. Obviously has quite a bit of pop in his bat. That's going to help out. Now you've got a few all-or-nothing guys like Giancarlo Stanton has become very much one of those guys throughout his career, and they were able to just find something with Trent Grisham last year. He looked like his career was done out there with San Diego, but he hits for 34 home runs last season. But the addition of Cody Bellinger, I think, is big. Now Anthony Volpe is dealing with a little bit of an injury, but again, he was a guy that didn't hit for any sort of average whatsoever. Now you're probably going to be having Jose Calabreu giving more at-bats. Obviously his power isn't quite as good, but he's a guy that's able to reach base. And you have Amed Rosario as well, who can play some infield as well. He's another guy that can move the line in for the San Francisco Giants. The Rafael Devers trade through the first 50, 60 games was not great. He did have a strong second half of the season. I think that the Giants are going to be able to reach base a little bit better this year with the pickup of Luis Arias, a guy that he hit a 292 last year, and for his standards, that was way down for him. So, he's going to hit 300 plus in this ballpark. He's not going to be hitting any sort of home runs out there in San Francisco. San Francisco, a top 5 pitcher-friendly park, but that's what you need if you're the San Francisco Giants. Guys that are able to move the line. Having a clean bill of health for Jung-Woo Lee, I think, is very big. He had a good, first few games of the season, then he gets hurt last season. I still think that there might be a little bit of upside with someone like a Harrison Bader they picked up as well, former New York Yankee, who had himself a solid year last year. They don't necessarily have a bunch of super-duper mashers. Devers is obviously a 30-plus home run guy. Matt Chapman in a normal park is a 30-plus home run guy as well. In San Francisco last year, more like 21 home runs, and he's won the streakiest hitters on the face of planet Earth. But also for the San Francisco Giants, they had a really good bullpen to start the year last year, traded away a few pieces with Duvall being one of those guys, and I don't necessarily feel great about it this season. Jose Buto is a nice multi-inning guy. Eric Miller is a guy that was able to get the job done last season, but they're going to be probably relying upon quite a bit of Ryan Baruchias, Sam Entages, Yoel Piguero are guys that are right now dealing with injuries, so they're going to be relying a lot on Ryan Walker as well, who is not good last year. North of a 4 ERA. Ryan Walker 2 years ago, 2024, this guy was amazing. I think that you get somewhere between A and B. Like during the 2023 campaign, he was supposed to get more like a 3.23 ERA, but he wasn't getting too many strikeouts. I think that you get more of that Ryan Walker, but with the Yankees having the firepower that they do have, and again, these starters, they're probably only going to be going like 75, 80 pitches. You're not going to see their full allotment of time, and I do think that the Giants bullpen really was exposed towards back half of the season. I think that that allows the Yankees to get the job done here night number 1, so I'm taking this 7 over, so my total is 7.2, and with the Yankees, I'd be willing to lay up to minus 132 on the money line in on the Yanks, and that'll wrap things up for the Wednesday edition of the Baseball Betting Show, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Big thanks to Curtis Rogers, who does such amazing work over at 710 Seattle Sports. He joined me in the likes segment. If you do like hearing from this fine podcast, the Baseball Betting Show, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcast, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have 1 or 2 ways to fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at @GUnit_81. Keep in mind, letter C on they mean does not matter. So per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it's very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. And we are back every single day that there's games. I'm giving you guys picks and analysis on every single one of them. So I'll be back with you guys once again tomorrow. Thank you.